Hey anglers, I was really kind of inspired to make this video as a result of many of your YouTubes that you guys put out, and really seeing a lot of you young anglers that are so passionate and excited about the sport of bass fishing, and kind of showing everyone and sharing with everyone the tackle that you use, and the techniques, how you use the tackle. We really are in a different time right now with social media, the way that it is. When I was a kid growing up in South Florida, fishing, the banks of Snapper Creek Canal, the only chance I had to really to learn anything about fishing was, going with other people and occasionally having the opportunity to fish with other people that maybe could share a different technique. We just really didn't have fishing shows and whatnot. I was like a kid in the candy store, when I had the opportunity to go to Golden Triangle, which was a sporting good retail store, and they had a pretty good fishing department. And to be able to go there and look at all that tackle and stuff was like going to Disney World. So seeing some of your videos really just kind of inspired me to do this, and to share with you guys the tackle and the techniques that I use, and that works for me. So feel free to, send any comments or questions, and I'd be happy to assist. First thing is that it's not about how much you spend on a rod or a reel. Though I can appreciate a $200 or a $300 rod or a $200, $300 reel, um, you know, spending $400 on a rod and reel, by itself is not going to make you a better angler. Actually, in some cases, it may hurt if you're just going out and buying a rod and reel because your favorite tournament angler uses that particular rod and reel. So you go out and you buy it, but really it doesn't fit the technique or the techniques that you use or where you fish. And I think that's what's really the most important thing. If you're a beginning angler, or maybe you're not a beginning angler, maybe you've been fishing for several years and you happen to fish riverbank or canal banks, or maybe you've got some local ponds in and around your neighborhood that you like to fish at, but you're fishing from the bank. The reality of it is that that's going to limit you to the type of techniques that you're going to be able to use. And once again, growing up fishing the canal banks in South Miami, I mean, I never really had a requirement for more than, two or three fishing rods. I'd get up in the morning, grab my little Plano tackle box, and grab my two fishing rods, jump on my bike with, one of my closest friends, and, we'd ride on down to the canal and start fishing. And the reality of it is that in fishing those canal banks, for the most part, the only techniques that I was really using was I'd throw a lot of weightless worms, and I would throw a lot of top water jerk baits, like a Rapala or like a Rebel, maybe a small, popper type of a bait. And so for me, the rods that I needed were really more ultralight and light rods to be able to cast light baits. And it wasn't until really later when I started to want to throw some larger topwater poppers and plugs that maybe a stiffer rod would be more appropriate. Now today, I fish from a bass boat, and obviously when you have the luxury of fishing from a bass boat, you really have so many more techniques to your disposal. And because of that, typically it requires having more rod and reels that are really more technique specific. So there really is no magical number as to how many rod and reels you need. It really has to do with, once again, where you're fishing and what type of techniques do you like to fish. For me, It's really all about, how many rods can I have on my front deck comfortably and be able to cast fish, catch fish and get around, work the trolling motor. I have a Champion 187 dual console, and the front deck on that boat on a, basically a 19-foot boat, it's long enough, but it's a fairly narrow beam and a fairly narrow front deck. So I'm probably not going to get as many rods up on the front deck as maybe someone who's fishing from a Ranger Comanche, a 21-foot boat. They're probably going to be able to get a few more rods up on the front deck than what I can comfortably. So in many cases, I'll have 7 or 8 rods on my front deck, and then I'll also have, a couple of rods down below in the rod holder, and which is accessible. So the first things first, what I wanted to share with you guys with some of my tackle. Once again, it's not about how many rod and reels you have. It's about the technique that you're using, and it isn't about how much you spend. Though I can afford to have, more expensive tackle than what I do, I really don't believe that having the most expensive rod or the most expensive reel that money can buy is going to make you a better angler. Once again, I can appreciate a $200 or $300 rod. I can appreciate a $200, $300, $400 reel, but I can really just as much appreciate a $70, $80 rod and a $70, $80 reel as I can a $200 or $300 one. So I think that's important. This particular rod, this is a 7-foot All-Star American Classic, and I don't use that term loosely. This is an American Classic. It's made in the United States, manufactured and built in Houston, Texas, and that's kind of important to know. All-Star is still around today, and it really kind of perturbs me when I see the phrase Great American Rod Company, because the reality of it is today All-Star only makes 3 series of rods, including the Classic series, and all 3 are made overseas. So this All-Star rod is the American Classic. It is made in the U.S. and made in Houston, Texas. 7-foot, medium heavy, fast action. I'm using 15-pound P-line CX Premium, which is a fluorocarbon coated line. I really like it a lot. I haven't switched to a full 100% fluorocarbon. I like this because it has less stretch than monofilament. It's a pretty thin diameter line, so real low visibility in the water. Really good strength. So I really do like this line. And then of course this particular rod is a technique specific rod. This is their Carolina rigging rod. It can be used for throwing larger jigs, larger Texas rigs, but really this rod is always rigged for Carolina rigging. I usually make my own Carolina rigs, but I do have some pre-rigged that are in that I carry in my FTO tackle bag, just because it's a pain when you get broke off to have to make another Carolina rig. So I do have some pre-rig ones, but for the most part, I do like to make my own. And I do carry the separate weights and the beads and the swivels to make that on the fly if I have to. The reel is a Pflueger President wide spool reel, and I like the wide spool because it holds, it has more line capacity. When you're throwing a heavy Carolina rig out there, you can throw it 80, 70, 80, 90 yards, depending on the wind conditions. So it's nice to be able to have that big wide spool. I really like this reel a lot. This is the one and only Pflueger bait casting reel that I have. And, I do recommend it. The only thing that, what I would say is that I probably wouldn't like this reel as much if I had it on one of my other 6'6" medium heavy fast action rods that I do a lot of switching between um, shaky head, Texas rig, jigs. And if I was going to a bunch of different weights and having to adjust, um, I probably wouldn't like the reel as much. The Pflueger President reel um, does not use magnets. It uses the centrifugal braking system, which requires you to take off the cover, and then there's pins that are on the inside that you can pull, and you want to do it evenly, and then that's what gives you more resistance, from backlashes. Other than that, though, once you have the centrifugal brakes dialed in, this really is a great reel. And for those people who've been using reels that are centrifugal braking, I mean, most Shimano reels that people use centrifugal brakes. So if it's something that you're used to, you'll be really happy with this reel. This All-Star rod has Fuji alkaline guides. It also has Fuji reel seat with a hole-through design, so you can feel the graphite blank through it. Not all that important, in my opinion. Fishing Carolina rigs, in most cases, when you get bit on this, you really know it. The next rod that I have is a 6'6" medium weight, regular action Daiwa Procaster rod. I love this rod, and this rod is a great example of you don't have to spend 180, $160 for a good rod, and certainly not one that's going to break the bank. I have two of these rods, and both of these I really use with small square bill, shallow to medium diving crankbaits. I'll throw smaller lipless crankbaits with this, as well as smaller spinner baits with this, because of the regular action kind of gives you more bend through the rod as opposed to a fast action rod. So this rod really is designed for fishing, crankbaits, spinner baits, lipless crankbaits. It's got nice Fuji guides, Fuji reel seat. It's got pretty good quality cork grips. It's funny because a lot of rods that you see today, and certainly some of the more expensive rods that you see today, have gone back to the EVA foam grips. Well, EVA foam was kind of popular back in the 80s, and then really the only time that you would see a rod with EVA foam was really on a cheap rod. And the reason being is because EVA foam is inexpensive compared to good quality cork. Now, the big difference between premium cork and just say, just quality cork is the bands. It's the width of the bands and the amount of fillers that are used in the cork. So over time, this cork, the reality of it is that it probably has more fillers in this cork than what a rod would if it was a $200 rod or a $300 rod. But I can tell you that this rod is newer than another Procaster that I'm going to show you next. And though it has a little more wear and tear to it, the cork still is in really good shape. This particular rod does not have a hole-through design through the Fuji reel seat, so you can't feel the actual blank through here. But once again, when you're fishing crankbaits, it's not about those little subtle strikes, because you don't want to set the hook too fast on a crankbait. So, I really don't think that that's really all that important. Once again, it's about the technique that you're fishing. The line that I'm using is P-line. This is a 12-pound CX Premium. Really, most of my rods are using the P-line CX Premium. As I said on my other rod, I really like this kind of hybrid line. It's a fluorocarbon coating. The lure that I have on right now, which is one that I use a lot, is a Spro Little John square bill crankbait. And I think if you were to compare this to a Strike King KVD square bill crankbait, this dives a little deeper than the KVD Strike King crankbait. And this is basically Spro's equivalent to the Sexy Shad. Great color, great lure combination here where I fish, which is in North Texas. The reel that I'm using on here is a Procaster Rojo 100H. This is a 6.3 to 1. The reel really matches the rod well. But if I were ever going to have a flipping specific rod, something that I just use for flipping, maybe like a 7 foot 7.2 flipping rod or longer, I'd probably pull this reel off and put it on that rod. And here's why. The first thing is that this reel is a 6.3 to 1 gear ratio. So I really kind of have to remind myself that when I'm, cranking a crankbait, to kind of slow it down some, because a 6.3 to 1 gear ratio, though it's not a high speed, it's not a 7 to 1 gear ratio, it's a pretty quick gear ratio. And when I fish crankbaits, you really want to slow it down some. So I have to remind myself of that. The other thing is that it has a flipping function, so that when you push down on the clutch, the auto cast, this little button here will pop up. So when you flip, you cast, and all you have to do is push this button back in, and now you've re-engaged the clutch. You don't have to turn the handle. And that's what's really nice about this reel. So you think about that. You cast, you push down the button on your clutch, and then all you have to do is push this back in. You don't have to reach over and crank, do a full resolution of your crank to re-engage the clutch. Another thing on Daiwa reels that, I'm not really aware of any other reel that does it. There could be some, but I believe it's a Daiwa patent feature, is that with the AutoCast clutch, when you push this in, you can cast, and then just flip it right back up. And once again, you don't have to turn the handle. And that makes it really convenient when you're throwing a jig and you just want to go ahead and re-engage and start jigging and not necessarily start reeling. So every Daiwa reel that I have has that capability and has had for years, and I really like that. Another feature of the Rojo is that the top flips. So this opens, and it just makes it easier to feed the line through and tie on. So nice little feature that it has. Once again, this is not a really expensive reel. This is, it might be, I think it was like $70 or $80 when I bought it new. So it really is not, it's not going to break the bank. Has a really good MagForce Z magnetic braking system. It's got a aluminum frame, aluminum crank. It does have graphite composite side plates. So, if you're not a fan of that, certainly that helps with the cost of the reel, is that this is not an all aluminum reel. But it's a real nice reel. I like it. I'd recommend it. Now I have the exact same rod on another setup, and once again, 6'6", medium weight, regular action. I'm using the same line, 12-pound P-line, CX Premium. The lure that I have on it is a smaller, lipless, crankbait, very similar to that of like a rattle trap. The reel that I have on this is a Procaster Z, and this is the one and only left-hand retrieve bait caster that I have. And I bought it because, on my spinning reels, I cast right, I reel left. But on all my bait casters for years, I've always, casted right and then switch hands and reel right. So I wanted to try to go to a left hand to see if I would like it. And the answer is I really don't. I'm just so, I guess, trying to teach an old dog new tricks, but I prefer reeling on the right hand side. But I do love this reel. It's a fantastic reel. It's a 6:3 to 1 gear ratio, MagForce Z, magnetic braking system, aluminum spool. Like the other Procaster, this does have graphite side plates, aluminum crank, really good drag system. And, once again, you know, you can't, you can't beat this setup for the money. When you look at this rod, when you look at this reel's a little more expensive than the Rojo was. This reel's, if I remember correctly, was a little over $100 for this reel. But once again, I mean, love the reel, love the rod, just don't love having to retrieve on the left-hand side. But I always try to have two rods like this. I'll always have a crankbait on one, a lipless crankbait on the other, or a crankbait and a spinnerbait. So these two rod and reels are really kind of my go-to rod and reels and what I fish the most when I'm fishing hard baits. Another rod that I have, you guys are probably going to think that this is a bit old school, and maybe it is, but this is a 6'6", medium heavyweight, regular action. This is a Daiwa Procaster Interline rod. So a lot of you young kids that are out there, you've probably never seen a rod like this, but this rod has no guides except for the one guide at the bottom here where you feed the line through, and the line goes through the blank and out the tip, and there's a rounded tip at the front so that the line can really go out 360 degrees. Daiwa had several series of this. Years ago, they had a Team Daiwa version of this. They had the Procaster Z version of this, and then the Procaster X, which is what I have. This was really the entry level of the Interline rods. And I bought it because I'd never used an Interline rod before. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, so I didn't want to go out and buy a Team Daiwa rod, which would have, cost quite a bit more money. So I went ahead and I bought this rod. And this rod and reel, this sucker has seen a lot of action, caught a lot of fish. The largest bass I ever caught was 10-something on Lake El Salto, Mexico, and it was on this rod and reel. So once again, this is a Daiwa Procaster X rod. You're not going to find this in any tackle shop today. You might find one used online, and if it's in good shape, buy it. Once again, the fact that there are no guides on this really makes it nice because you don't have to worry about, feeding the line through the guide. Is it in the ring or not? You don't have to worry about stepping on guides, bending them, breaking them. And it also makes it easy when you look at, most rods that are designed with guides, the rod's really designed to bend one way, and that's to bend down. And the guides are situated so that the line is not dragging up against the blank. So the really nice thing about an Interline rod is you don't have to worry about any of the placement of the guides. The line goes through the blank, and then inside the blank there's grooves all the way up the rod. And really the only downside to an Interline rod is feeding the line through the rod. Daiwa does have a wire that comes with it. The line ties onto that wire. You push it into the rod. You basically turn it down, and it'll slide down some. Sometimes it'll slide all the way out. Sometimes it won't, and you just kind of do a fake, a cast, and it'll shoot that sucker right out the rod. So, when you're out in the boat, in most cases, you're not going to respool your rod. So it's not something you really worry about. Now, this is the only rod that I have braid on. And of course, I don't fill the spool with braid. Basically, I already had some 15-pound P-line on here. So basically what I did is I just used I used some of that as the backing on the spool, and then I tied that line to the braid. And so basically, I'm using braid on the majority of the line that I do cast out. Is the majority of that is going to be braid. The lure that I have on is a Spro Aruca Shad. This is the full size Aruca Shad. I really love this bait. Caught a lot of fish on it. As you can see, this thing's really wore out. What's really nice about this bait is how it goes through and how it works the bottom, bounces over rocks, bounces over tree limbs or stumps. Is really different than a lot of the other lipless crankbaits that are out there. Most of the lipless crankbaits that are out there, I find, get hung up a lot easier than what this does. The design of this nose down and how it hits the bottom really kind of keeps this bait from getting hung up as much as, nothing against a rattle trap, but a rattle trap. The other thing about the Spro Aruca Shad that I really like is that it uses Gamakatsu hooks on all their lures. And, let's face it, if I'm really out fishing, there are times where I will switch my treble hooks on some of my baits to Gamakatsu hooks. They're just better hooks. So this lure comes with Gamakatsu. The reel I love. I don't care about all the other reels that are out in the market, whatnot. This is a Procaster tournament. Daiya was made the Procaster tournament for years. They've obviously upgraded it over the years. They've come out with different models and variations of it. But the Procaster tournament, I think they finally ended this model maybe 3-4 years ago. So there was a lot of anglers out there that were still buying these things new. And even though you probably weren't seeing them on a lot of store shelves, sitting next to some of the Daiya Wisties reels or, the TDZ reels, the reality of it is there's a lot of anglers out there who use this reel who really love it. Now, what I like about this reel, this is a PT33C, and this is the cranking version of the Procaster tournament. And this particular reel, what's really cool about it is that this particular reel is I think it's a 3/8 or 3/9 to 1. I think it's a 3/9 to 1. This is a 3/8 to 1 gear ratio. Now, you're not going to be able to burn a spinnerbait or burn back a crankbait with this gear ratio, but the bottom line is that I find when you're typically using crankbaits, fish aren't always real aggressive. And you really find sometimes you have to slow your fishing down. So, this is the rod and reel that I like to go to when I really want to slow down my fishing. And a 3/8 to 1 gear ratio with a cranking, when you're cranking, is really important. Now, the reason why I put braid on this rod is because I throw my Yum umbrella rig with this rod. So I think, some people may argue, but I think you really need to have braid when you're throwing an umbrella rig. If not, you're probably going to lose them. And an umbrella rig, by the time you figure out the umbrella rig, the jig heads, the soft plastics that you attach, I mean, you've probably got $20. You've probably at least $20 into the umbrella rig when it's all said and done, and you don't want to snap your line and lose the umbrella rig. So, I think braid's important, and I put it on not because the 15-pound wasn't good enough for the crankbaits and the lipless crankbaits that I was throwing, but I really put it on because of the umbrella rig. The next rod that I have is, without a doubt, my favorite cranking rod. This is a 7-foot Falcon original rod. Falcon is another rod company that's they make their rods right here in the U.S. This particular rod they make in Oklahoma. And the original series, kind of like the All-Star American Classic, the original is Falcon's entry-level rod. And in my opinion, you really can't beat the quality of this rod, even though it's kind of considered their entry-level rod. Fuji alkaline guides, um, Fuji reel seat. Once again, this reel seat does not have the hole-through design. And when you're throwing a crankbait, I really don't think that is as important. Good quality cork handle. The line that I'm using on this is 15-pound CX premium P-line, and the hard bait that I have on here is a KVD Strike King Sexy Shad deep diving crankbait. The reel is Daiwa's new Lexa. This is the 100P, which is the power version, and this is with the 4:9 to 1 gear ratio. So once again, when I'm cranking and I want to fish a slower speed, 4:9 to 1 is a great all-around gear ratio to use. This is a super reel. Aluminum frame, aluminum side plates, swept aluminum handles, Magforce Z, magnetic braking system, auto cast clutch, infinite anti-reverse, ported spool. This is a great reel for the money. I'd highly recommend it.